Somaliland. But I would say this group, some of them are members of what they call Somaliland Focus UK. And Michael is the chairman of that Somaliland Focus UK. It was formed after the parliamentary elections in 2005. And that group, one of their main goals is to advocate for Somaliland. Somaliland image, Somaliland suffers mainly of isolation, which is a hindrance to its recognition. So at least to take Somaliland out of that isolation, to publish, to make interviews, to make the world know about this entity, about this democratic process, about the progress they are making. And I think that contributes a lot if Somaliland is going to endeavor for recognition. So this group is already functioning and working to help Somaliland when they are back home in the UK and elsewhere. Thank you.
Have come up at some point. Of course, as observers, we are strictly non-partisan. We take an objective viewpoint, and that, I'm afraid, does include questions about the recognition issue. But what I can say is, I think we can all echo this, is that obviously this election marks a major achievement in Somaliland's progress. That this is a building block to further democracy, as far as we can tell. The problems with the recognition question have always been political ones, not anything to do with the legality of its claim. This is, I think, fairly undisputed. We certainly recognise the achievements of Somaliland, and we see it as a particularly effective entity that is governing itself reasonably coherently. Some problems, of course, it's a poor country. We would certainly suggest that Somaliland, after this election, looks for fresh ways of achieving what it wishes, and it may be that this election gives impetus along that path. We would certainly welcome the fact that Somaliland is striving for recognition of its achievements. Thank you. There are a set of internationally recognised electoral standards, and largely speaking, we believe that this election did meet those standards. Essentially, the freeness and the fairness that we referred to is a large component of those international standards. We mentioned in terms of fairness there were some worries over incumbency. We don't think that was sufficiently significant enough to actually affect the fairness. In terms of the freeness, Michael has mentioned some instances. Again, we think the process was free and transparent, and to that extent, both freeness and fairness criteria were met. Therefore, we believe it met international standards. Thank you.
That there was a reasonable amount of financial support for the election as a whole in terms of absolute numbers, and in terms of the percentage of the budget. The international funding was critical, was a substantial portion of it. The question you had about the results, I was in fact going to make that point anyway. This process hasn't finished yet. The electoral process will not finish until the final results have been announced and accepted by all of the parties. So this relates a wee bit to the question about recognition, because I think that the international community is still going to be watching very closely to see what happens when the result is announced. So I think this press conference is not the end of that process. What happens? Well, there are formal mechanisms for dealing with disputes, but probably the informal or maybe you could say customary systems for mediation will be just as or more important in terms of encouraging losers to accept their position.